Hi there. In recent years, Sudan has made serious efforts to improve bilateral relations with many countries. However, the incessant disputes and the slow peace process in South Sudan still raise concerns. How does Sudan position itself in the continent of Africa amid global turmoil? What will be the new momentum to strengthen China-Sudan ties under the framework of the FOCAC? And as Sudan facilitated and witnessed the signing of the peace deal between the South Sudanese government and the country's rebel groups, what is the role of Sudan in mediating between warring factions in South Sudan and promoting peace in the region? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to speak with His Excellency Dirdeiry Ahmed, Foreign Minister of the Republic of the Sudan. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much.
Can you brief us on the commitments that the Chinese government has made concerning the industrialization in Africa at large, but Sudan in particular?
Well, we have right now, or rather, we are right now just recuperating from the impact of the secession of South Sudan. When South Sudan seceded in the year 2011, it seceded with about 3/4 of our resources in petroleum. So that affected us a great deal, and of course, it meant that our economy had slowed a bit for a while, and in fact, right now we are even facing some economic problems that were prominently noticed over the previous few years. That affected the relation, the economic relation that we had with China in terms of a sort of you can say a slowdown. So now the challenge is how to really see to it that the relation will be now witnessing a sort of a hike, or at least a sort of an uprise trend. What's going to assist us in this respect is that we had recently sealed a deal with South Sudan, peace deal among South Sudanese themselves, that makes it possible for South Sudan to be peaceful, and makes it possible as well for South Sudan to continue producing oil at all the levels of the 2011 and before, which means we'll be in a position to draw some of the royalties that we are supposed to draw from South Sudan, and which means we will be brought to levels, if not equivalent, very close to the levels that we had in the year 2011. We are preparing now for this phase with our Chinese partners.
Is it possible in any case for the two Sudans to be united again?
United in political terms might not be right now in question, but united in the terms of cooperation economically.
You mean economic integration instead of having a single political entity?
Single political entity is right now not on the horizon, but of course we have already started working together in economic terms. At least now we admit the fact that we are having a united petroleum sector, and we are going to develop that petroleum sector collectively and hopefully with the help of China.
Let me focus on the role China played in managing the crisis that led to the secession of the South Sudan. What kind of role did China play?
Well, China by that time, of course, was controlling most of the oil fields in Sudan. That's the Chinese companies which were working there, and that helped the secession to be smooth in terms of economy. That's the petroleum sector. Issues were sorted out very easily at that point of time because of the Chinese help, and also Chinese were very much encouraged to take part in sorting out also political problems in the two countries after they have separated. For instance, in Sudan, they have just sent a battalion, engineering battalion, to Darfur to help with the problems of Darfur. So the presence of China had been a positive element in that very difficult time of Sudan and South Sudan.
Can you frankly tell us whether South Sudan has benefited enormously from the independence? I mean,
Well,
in terms of the economic prosperity.
I'm afraid nobody can at all tell you this. South Sudan independence, of course, was something that had been yearned for by South Sudanese for quite a time. But nonetheless, South Sudan started as of 2013, that's just 2 years or so after secession from Sudan, to experience internal difficulties in terms of civil wars and so on and so forth that continued escalating up to the moment. The deal that we have just concluded, Khartoum, that is when the factions over there the peace agreement that they have initiated on the 28th of August is now touted as a solution for the South Sudan problems, as the way forward to bring South Sudan to peace.
Well, a peace deal was inked between the two Sudans after years of negotiation and the two civil wars, leading to the killing of people in their thousands. But why did you use secession instead of independence to describe the new identity and entity of South Sudan?
That's the way both countries, both parties decided to describe it in the comprehensive peace agreement that was signed between South Sudanese and Sudanese in the year 2005. Secondly, it's not a concept acceptable in Africa to believe that an African country had colonized another African country and then that country had won independence by seceding from the parent country. That's also not acceptable in Africa. We don't believe that we have been colonizers. Both countries were under one colonial master, and then for so many reasons it was decided that they part ways. So there is no harm in that, and there is no point in referring to that as independence. It's definitely straightforward secession.
The Sudan is a member of the Arab League, and recently you have normalized relations with Washington. To what degree Saudi Arabia has played the role of brokering the game so that you can resume normal relations with the United States?
The relations with the United States is tied up with particular procedures of dialogue and negotiations. There were 5 tracks that were named and agreed by the parties in which progress had been in fact made before finally it was decided to lift the sanctions. Nonetheless, Saudi Arabia, among others, also helped the approachment process and assisted with that. We are glad that Saudi Arabia had played that role, and we always look forward for Saudi Arabia and other friends in the region like the UAE when it comes to also lifting the next phase of the sanctions.
What about the issue of human rights from the perspective of Western media? The United States and other Western governments have always accused President Bashir of violating human rights, particularly in the area of Darfur, and China was also allegedly involved, for example, in not interfering sufficiently with internal affairs. China says we never interfere with the internal affairs of other countries. But can you brief us on the latest progress? Because the United States always insists that human rights knows no boundary.
Well, human rights is the point of dialogue between us and the United States. Nonetheless, we are proud to say that as of the year 2017, it has been agreed within the Human Rights Council that the Sudan record of human rights is improving, and now...
In what areas are you making progress?
In so many different areas, particularly the areas linked to the conflict in Darfur and other conflict areas. We believe that if this trend continues, as is, we might witness by the year 2019 the end of special procedures with respect to Sudan.
Our Chinese audiences are most concerned about if Chinese business stakes have been seriously endangered with what you call secession of South Sudan. What can you tell us about the protection of the Chinese business stakes?
It's right now agreed that in South Sudan in particular, Sudan deploying now troops on the invitation of South Sudan to the oil fields. That had been done as of June last year, this year, and this is functioning well and helping the two countries. We believe that a point of time will come when South Sudanese themselves create their own unified military and take over this sometime soon. That will be, in fact, the right formula security-wise to see to it that Chinese experts and Chinese businessmen and oil companies will be operating in a very conducive atmosphere and with no problems.
The Horn of Africa is experiencing dynamic geopolitical changes like the reapproach between the long-time rivals, Ethiopia and Eritrea, and re-established diplomatic ties between Asmara and Mogadishu. Can you kindly tell us Sudan's agenda in this region and how will that impact Sudan's diplomatic strategy?
We always view the Horn of Africa as unified and should be unified. Those countries are having so much in common, economically, in political terms, socially, and you name it. We had been, in fact, for some time, not really seeing eye to eye for so many reasons. But now time is coming, and coming very fast, for the countries of this region to have a general rapprochement in which all of the ways will lead to each other, and people will really continue to work together collectively and hopefully also to integrate sometime soon.
A few years ago we had the Arab Spring and the implications for the neighboring countries. As a member state of the Arab League, how do you position yourself in this process of democratization, and how do you assess the relationship between political institutions and the success of the market economy?
When it comes to democratization, I think the Arab Spring had proved that the idea of trying to impose democracy on countries through propaganda, through serving agenda that are created somewhere else had failed. We have witnessed that throughout the region. Nonetheless, this does not mean that democracy is not having any place in this region. No, on the contrary. Democracy should be given an opportunity, should be given the chance to take roots, but it should be homegrown democracy. It should be democracy that takes account, and rather full account, of all of the concerns of the region and also all of the social values and uniqueness of this part of the world. There is no experience that in politics that is valid for everybody. Every country is having its own nature, its own specifics, and those should be always reflected in the political system that's adopted in that country. We in Sudan, we have been throughout the turmoil that had happened in the region because of the Arab Spring. We have continued to be an oasis of tranquility, not because we are different from the others, but because we had really seen to it that the real issues of democracy would be addressed. We had the national dialogue, which brought together all of the political parties.
With the end of the Cold War, excuse me, Your Excellency, with the end of the Cold War, many Western scholars hailed the advent of liberal democracy. An American scholar said in his book, The Last Man and the End of History, he is Francis Fukuyama, by the way, that liberal democracy has been able to prevail. Now, do you take Arab Spring as a result or combination of the clashes between different civilizations, since South Sudan and Sudan has different religions? You are Arabs and they're mostly Christians. So do you think this is an inevitable clash between different religions, and therefore, to a large degree, it's clashes between civilizations?
Well, I think the theory of clash of civilization had proved to be wrong. It's now, in fact, civilizations are coming up together throughout the world. The theory of end of history has also proven wrong. It's now, in fact, only the
it's getting nowhere.
The end of geography, rather. This is what we are witnessing. You know, the world is coming together, but definitely with its distinctive features. Not we don't have, you know, the idea of one world with particular civilization that had prevailed over everybody. Civilizations are there, but they are not conflicting. They are not clashing. History is still in the making, and it has never been, you know, nearing any end. In Sudan and South Sudan, we might have gone through that experience of secession because of the factors that you have mentioned and so many other factors. But nonetheless, right now we are understanding quite well that it's for us to live together, it's for us to reinvent ourselves and to see to it that we find a formula for government and we find a formula for approachment that makes it possible for us to live in peace and be two viable states in terms of economy and otherwise.
We appreciate your insightful analysis about the so-called paradigm shift. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Dirdeiry Ahmed, Foreign Minister of the Republic of the Sudan. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. What do you think of the benefits or the benefits of doubt concerning China's business presence and our massive investment in Africa?
Africa believes that China is a partner that is different from so many other partners in the world, a partner that takes business seriously, and a partner that takes business with no conditions or necessarily correlating it to politics. There is another reason also for Africa to be very proud of its relation with China, is that China is coming up always with innovative solutions for the problems addressed by Africa and Africans. Another reason is the fact that China is coming up also with a package of initiatives, like for instance, the Road and Belt Initiative.
Welcome back, sir. Mr. Foreign Minister, the issue today for the whole world in the wake of the Cold War remains which one comes across as the most important or an issue of greater urgency, development or peace? As the architect for the comprehensive peace agreement between the Sudans, do you think you have benefited enormously from the peace dividends?
Well, I think the question might be valid somewhere else, but not for us in Africa. For us in Africa, peace always takes priority. When there is a civil war, unless you stop the civil war, it's very difficult to think in terms of democracy or development. So unless you have peace, you can't talk of development. Right now, we are having another opportunity for peace. In the past, when we had the CPA, that gave us, you know, a sort of respite that made it possible for the country to be developed, both sides of the country to be developed. Definitely the development that we have witnessed as of the year 2005 when the CPA was signed and until 2011 was by no means, you know, precedented. Right now also we are expecting the new peace agreement among the South Sudanese that will make it possible for South Sudan to harness its own resources. We are expecting also that to benefit development and also democratization in both countries.
With the Belt and Road Initiative put forward 5 years ago, most economists have been talking about the positive implications of this proposal. Until a few months ago, when an article from the United States sought to build the theory of a debt trap. What do you think of the benefits or the benefits of doubt concerning China's business presence and our massive investment in Africa.
China had been a partner of Africa for quite a time, and a very successful partner. The initiative of the Northern Belt is in fact an inspiration of the history of relation that had so happily existed between Africa and China for centuries. And this means that it's only natural to talk about the presence of China in Africa as a reality of life. We might be witnessing, of course, some problems. That's normal anywhere. But if there is any relation that is problem-free, or at least with very little number of problems, it is the China-Africa relations. Africa is very much banking right now on the level of relation that it's having with China. Africa believes that China is a partner that is different from so many other partners in the world, a partner that takes business seriously, and a partner that takes business with no conditions or necessarily correlating it to politics. That's very important, and that's maybe the reason why China is now the first partner for Africa. There is another reason also for Africa to be very proud of its relation with China, is that China is coming up always with innovative solutions for the problems addressed by Africa and Africans. Another reason is the fact that China is coming up also with a package of initiatives, like for instance, the Road and Belt Initiative.
China and the rest of the world expect Africa to avoid making the mistakes we have made over the past 4 decades since we first opened ourselves up and started reform, namely in areas of low carbon development. Do you think in the new era, digital technology would help avoid repeating our mistakes to develop your green industries?
For sure. When industrialization moves to Africa, this does not mean that it should move at the level that it had been at a point of history. It would be moving to Africa at this point of time, and having in mind the concerns that everybody right now is taking account of. So this means that when we talk about industrialization of Africa, we are fully cognizant that industrialization in Africa shall be always green, and Africa shall go green, and definitely Africa is not having no other option but going green.
The last question is about infrastructure. Are you optimistic that China's help will show up your development of the infrastructure?
Well, infrastructure, of course, is very much lacking in Africa. We have had already tapped some of the capabilities of China in different aspects, like speed rail, which already started in some parts of Africa. Likewise also telecommunication, and so on and so forth. So for sure we are banking very much on China for the development of the infrastructure of Africa, and I think this is one field that we are collaborating with China and collaborating very well.
We keep our fingers crossed for the success of your economy based on the digital technology and regional inter-cooperation. Thank you so much. Seeing is believing. I hope our crew will travel to your country and do reports based on what we witnessed. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much.